It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Well, hello once again. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are you? We got Marc Watson here today. Marc is a Canadian author from Calgary, Alberta. And his new book is called Between Conversations, which is available now. Marc and I get into an interesting conversation about genre, which any of you who have followed the show know that I have a particular opinion about all the bazillion different genres out there as it pertains to music. So I put the question to him in regards to books, and his answer was very interesting, although similar to how genre pertains to the music business. It's pretty much the same thing in the book business. So, interesting conversation. Stick around for that. For more information on Marc, you can go to marcwatson.ca, and that's MarcWatson. He's also on Facebook at Marc Wrote a Book, and on Twitter at Write Watson, Write. So, we will be right back. Stick around with Marc Watson.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy, right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
Hi there, this is Stuart Epps, record producer. This is my story about Elton John, working with him in those early years, going back to 1967 at Dick James, all the amazing tours, those first recordings, going through to Rocket Records, and it's an amazing story about his incredible rise to stardom and my part in that. So look forward to taking you on that journey. So here we go. Yeah, and to order this great audio CD, please just email me at stuartepps@talk21.com. That's Stuart, Stuart, Epps, EPPS, at talk, TALK, 21 in figures.com. Stuart Epps at talk21.com. Email me and I'll give you all the details for buying this brilliant audio disc. Thank you, bye.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of the Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Are you an independent musician? How would you like to have your songs played on hundreds of radio stations just like the one you're listening to right now? Join MusicSubmit.com and we'll promote your music to radio stations and blogs in your genre. It's free to set up your account, and we guarantee your music will be considered for airplay by radio stations worldwide. Why not sign up today? It's free. MusicSubmit.com. Radio promotion for indie musicians.
Hi, this is John Morgan, production supervisor for DJC Productions. You're listening to The Douglas Coleman Show.
Okay, please welcome to The Douglas Coleman Show, Marc Watson. Hi, Marc. How are you?
I am doing great, Douglas. Thank you very much for having me today.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. Let's see. You're an author, and you live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, right?
That is correct. Yes, sir.
Tell me about Calgary. What in my mind, I picture a very frontier sort of town with moose walking around.
Very similar, only usually it's coyotes instead of moose. It is, Alberta is very much the Texas of the North, I like to say. It's very similar mentality, very similar kind of people and personalities. We have one very centralized working class city, and then about 3 hours away from that, we have one still kind of Western but very modern city, and that would be Calgary. It is a city of diversity when it comes to modern technology and modern living, mixing with that Western frontier mentality, and it especially comes out for 10 days every year in July for the Stampede.
What's the Stampede?
The Calgary Stampede is the world's largest outdoor rodeo, the greatest outdoor show on earth, and it is a 10-day celebration of Western culture, and it's basically just a gigantic fair and has all kinds of things to see and do, as well as a fantastic rodeo that cannot be missed. It's the largest rodeo outside of the one in Houston in the world, and it is a celebration for the city every first full week of July.
What kind of winters do you guys have up there? Is it pretty brutal?
The coldness is mostly what gets to you. Calgary is located in a kind of semi-arid, not quite desert, but we don't get a whole lot of precipitation of any kind. So we can get dumped on for snow, and we've definitely had some bad snow, but it's the weeks of minus 40 that really get to you. And it doesn't matter what temperature I'm talking, if it's Celsius or Fahrenheit. Minus 40 is minus 40, and
that's true.
It makes you feel alive. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's funny about the Celsius and Fahrenheit, because I can never do that in my head. I can never convert it. But once you get down to 20, 30, 40, it starts to come together where they're both right at the same point. I found that very interesting. I was in Toronto one time, and I saw one of those flashing digital clocks on a bank, and they had the Fahrenheit and Celsius both up there. And they were like within a degree of each other, and it was like minus 30 or something. It was funny.
Yeah. I believe it's at minus 42.3 or 0.4 that they are exactly the same. But as you say, you get below minus 20 or minus 30, it doesn't matter. We're talking about a degree or two here, and it's cold. That's all you need to know.
It's cold. Oh, it's brutally cold. Yeah, definitely. So how many books have you written to date?
I have written 4 books to date. There was my debut novel, an urban fantasy dark comedy called Death Dresses Poorly. That was followed up pretty closely by an epic science fantasy duology called Catching Hell, Part 1 Journey and Part 2 Destination. Those two both released in the beginning and end of 2018. And as of today, I have book number 4, which is Between Conversations, Tales from the World of Ryu Jin, and it is a compilation of short stories. It's an anthology that take place in the same world as Catching Hell, though reading Catching Hell is by no means a prerequisite. And it's a story that takes place chronologically. There's 9 stories, and they start from the late 1500s and go forward to thousands of years in the future, and it's meant to focus on all the little stories that are on the outside of the main characters of my Ryujin world, and how regular people like you and me react to living in a world with godlike powers as well as fantastical technology, as it's very much a combination of those two worlds.
So why do you write? Why don't you just, work as a plumber or something?
Well, I do have a full-time job that I very much love, working at an engineering company, so I've got that going for me. But why do we write? Because I wanted to hear certain stories when I was younger, and I was very influenced by the pop culture I was consuming at the time, like when I was 13, 14, 15 years old. And I always just kind of took to writing. Some people can take to music, or they're very handy. They love to take things apart and put things together. And for me, it was always putting words together, and I always seemed to have a knack for being able to tell stories. It's just a natural thing that came to me, and I was originally not someone who embraced it, and then as time went on, I was, and then life happened, and I got away from writing, and I finally got back to it again kind of through my mid-20s to early 30s, and that's when I put together Catching Hell, which was the first book that I had written, even though it wasn't the first one that was released. And it was only 4 years ago in February that I decided, this is a thing I really want to do. So I was sitting on this book that I had written and it had taken a long time, and 4 year ago in February, I decided I want to be a writer. I don't want to do it full-time. That's not my goal here, but I enjoy doing it. It allows me to have a little bit of a personal escape. I live a very hectic lifestyle by choice, but every once in a while, for that 45 minutes to an hour a day that I can steal away into my cubicle at work, I get to escape into whatever world I choose.
So you do your writing while you're at work at your engineering job?
I do, yes, every lunch hour. I originally started working for the company, and I was in kind of a facilities and maintenance position, and I worked my way up to a desk job over the years. But while I was working in that position, I was very stimulated physically and not very much mentally. I needed some kind of escape, so we were going through a bit of a downturn, and there was fields of cubicles located in the building, and I could kind of steal away to one of those on my lunch hour and write quietly in one of these cubicles surrounded by the stereotypical cubicle walls. And I never really stopped. I've always really liked writing in what I call pink noise. It's not full-on white noise. It's not the hustle and bustle of the city of red noise, but it is just kind of a low thrum that sits in the background, whether it's at work or I'm at a coffee shop or when I was in school. That's always seemed to be when I do my best writing. I'm not very good at writing in a nice, quiet nook style space, and I definitely can't write in the evenings. I am done for the day.
So I'm looking at your bio here, and it says author of genre fiction of all lengths and styles. Give me an example of the styles of fiction that you write. I
like to not pigeonhole myself into, I am a science fiction writer, I am a fantasy writer, I am a romance writer, I am a whatever. I have written the different lengths, as you say. I got my first published work out on a website called 101 Words, which is flash fiction that is only allowed to be 101 words, so it's about efficiency of writing. And I've also written a 250,000 word epic story and kind of everything in between that. I think that Between Conversations, my newest book, is an example of writing in different styles. I have written in science fiction, I have written a horror. They're not all the same kind of story. They're all genre fiction for sure, but it's not a collection of science fiction stories. It's not a collection of adventure stories or horror stories or young adult stories. It is, there's something in there for everybody. If you like genre fiction and you like the style in which I write, I am a very, I'm not a very technical writer. I freely admit it. I like writing in a very loose style, but I have also written in classic English prose style writing as well and had a lot of fun doing that. So it's an excellent mix. And if you want to see somebody kind of stretching themselves and going into genres that they wouldn't normally do, it's not my general focus, but I had stories to tell in them that I really wanted to get out there. This is a great place to start because it will really give you a sense of the styles that I can write in.
Are there a million genres for writers now like there is for musicians? Because when I grew up, and I'm a musician, lifelong musician, there were like 3 genres, that they would play on the radio. But then once the internet came along and everybody was doing DIY, all of a sudden there's 40,000 bazillion genres of music, and subgenre and sub-subgenres. And I don't know what's what anymore. Is it the same thing with books, or is books still more traditional with their genre listings?
And, this is an argument that I have a lot, because I'm very proud of my Catching Hell books and this reunion world that I've created. But I firmly and vehemently stick to the fact that it is science fiction. So not science fiction. That is science fantasy. It's not just science fiction. It's not just fantasy. It's an amalgamation. So and I have people who are like, oh no, you're one or the other, man. You're not just you gotta pick a lane. I'm like, well, why do we have to pick a lane? Like, we do this all the time to ourselves. I specifically went out and crafted a story. You have 2 characters who are separated. One travels into the world of the magic, and one travels into the world of the technological. And then it's a story of their adventures in those worlds as they're trying to come back together to get revenge for something they were wronged with. But it is absolutely like, there are robots, and there is lasers, and there are hoverboards and spaceships, and there are wizards, and there are magical manipulation, and there's all these things. So there are absolutely a million different genres that we can write in nowadays. But when you want to go and you want to find something on Amazon or your local bookstore, it's still broken down by, here's your science fiction, here's your fantasy, here's your romance, here's your mystery, here's your thrillers, here's your contemporary fiction. And they can be 1,000 different combinations of each of those, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be, and there's no reason why we shouldn't embrace that. Just because we want to write a really good mystery story doesn't mean it can't have a ghost in it, or a robot, or a really great love interest. Like, we can write all of these things. Nothing should be holding us back. And the only thing that kind of does hold us back is this adherence to the idea that it's got to be like one of those 6 genres, or, as I say, going to your favorite book purchasing place and only finding one of those 6 genres, and then you kind of got to wade through. For my first book, Death Dresses Poorly, good luck classifying it, really. Like, it doesn't belong anywhere, but as such, it kind of belongs everywhere.
Well, do you think from a business marketing perspective, having a bazillion genres is a good idea? An
excellent question, Douglas, and one that I'm still wrestling with. As someone who, as I freely admit, does not want to do this full time, and I like to call it a very serious hobby. I like to say that it's something that I do for fun, but with the utmost respect for those who want to do it full time. It can definitely hurt you. Absolutely it can, because the consumer, just the casual consumer, wants to go out and they want to, I want to read a romance this weekend. Well, I don't know, there's too many ghosts in this romance. That can absolutely hurt you. But that's not what motivated me personally. As I already touched on, it's what I want to create. It was the stories that I wanted to write, and it was the stories that I wanted to hear about. So I do it almost strictly as a exercise in vanity, because it is the story that I want to tell, and I'm not going to allow some editor or publisher to tell me, you're going to be more successful if there's a talking cat in this. I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. That's not the story that I wanted to tell. So you have to kind of weigh those. You can hyperanalyze every single piece of data that tells you that YA with werewolves is really popular right now, so you might be able to sell a bit more, so that's easier to market, and that's exactly what publishers are looking for. But if that's not what I want to write, then I'm not going to write it, and I would rather let the strength of my writing and the entertainment that a reader gets from picking up my books sell my future works for me, or even just conversations like this one. If you like what I have to say, my writing's pretty similar. It doesn't stray too far from how I personally think. So get out there and mix things up a little bit, and as much as possible, try not to worry about the pigeonholes that they will attempt to box you into when it comes to genre.
Well, it is a double-edged sword, and it's always the proverbial fight between the artist and the business side of a product, being the book or being a song. On the one hand, you want to give the artist as much freedom as they can be given to create. On the other hand, the business people have to put a label on it so they can sell it. A generic book with no label or with 50,000 sub-labels isn't a pretty package, and it's difficult to put on a particular shelf. However, if an author brings a book into a publisher and the publisher says, well, we can't fit this into anything, so you got to take stuff out or add stuff. What did you say, talking cat?
Yes.
That's not something the author wants to do. He's got his book and it's done and it's fine. So I suppose one has to decide where they want to go with their career as a writer. Like you said, you've already got a job. If you just do this as a serious hobby, then it doesn't really make any difference. You can have a genre that has, 12 words to it. But somebody else who wants to make a living at it is going to have to bend a bit to the publisher's whims and to the business model, if you will, yeah?
Absolutely. It's true. And in one regard, I respect that, because I don't think I would ever be able to do that. I don't think that I would ever be able to throttle myself that way when it comes to being a writer. But on the other hand, this is far more freeing for me because it's what I want to do. This is the path that I'm going to tread, and I'm going to carve my own path this way. And I feel much more comfortable that way than I ever would listening to what the focus groups have to say. And I know a lot of authors who kind of bristle at the thought of that. I'm painting in broad strokes here, but I've absolutely had conversations with authors who have said, well, I really wanted to do this, but my publicist was saying that this is going to sell a little bit better right now, or my agent is saying this would be a lot easier to sell if there was this. So I got rid of this and I changed this. And I respect their decision. Like I said, I don't think I could do it. But on the other hand, I feel sorry for you if you wanted to tell a particular story, but you felt that you had to change it just because that's not the way the market is leaning right now.
So you're not self-published. You have a publisher then?
I've tread both lines. For my first 3 books, I have a publisher. I have Fluky Fiction out of Maine, who published Death Dresses Poorly. I had another publisher for my Catching Hell duology, and they have since gone under a little while ago. And Fluky Fiction, who published my first book, swept in, and they're going to be re-releasing my Catching Hell story under their banner, so it's great to work with them again. But for Between Conversations, I wanted to do it all on my own because, well, for one thing, there isn't a whole lot of publishers or agents who are looking for a science fantasy anthology based in a world that was published by somebody else. I pigeonholed myself so much that I had
with
to
a talking
do it
cat.
myself. I had to kind of stretch out and do it on my own. But on the other hand, I have a lot of writer friends and contemporaries that I associate with who have had a lot of success and had a lot of fantastic advice when it comes to self-publishing. And it's a borderline vanity project for me at this point because I really like these stories, one of which was something that I had put together for submission to an anthology that didn't end up getting picked up by that anthology, but I just liked the story so much that it kind of drove it like, well, why can't I just write all these other stories or finish off all these other little stories that I wanted to do? So I've been traditionally published, but also this is self-publication.
Okay, so just to clarify this for some people, let's just do a quick example. Let's say that we're trying to write a science fiction, okay? We'll use that genre because I think most people know what that genre represents. Mm-hmm. What can you not put in to a science fiction novel that, a publisher would immediately disqualify you, saying, oh, you can't have that? What would that be? Talking cat would work.
I think first of all, it depends on the kind of science fiction. If you're trying to write hard science fiction, so you're trying to write
Star Wars,
complex. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like if you're trying to create that kind of science fiction, very, very grounded, very based science fiction, you can't have anything even close to kind of fantasy related, right? Like you can't have astronauts out on a mission to another planet and they land and there's a dragon in that world. Like even if you try and write it away as the nature of the evolution of that particular world, it's still not the kind of thing that they would be looking for. Also, I find, at least with science fiction, very rarely do you get deep relationships between multiple characters. They're almost always kind of stereotypes of one kind or another, whether they be the rogue or the person who's very technical. Almost like, I think Star Trek kind of nailed it. You've got a little bit of everything. Now that one eventually started to add more human drama to it, but
I agree with you about Star Trek. Star Trek is like the perfect sci-fi because it doesn't really get too heavy. No, and it drifts that way, especially nowadays. Like if you were to take a look at a classic original series Star Trek versus the most recent one, the Picard series, we're talking about 60 years of difference between one and the other, and you can see the evolution of it, where that was almost entirely character driven and the techno jargon was a backstory, and even then you kind of had to have watched The Next Generation in order to understand most of it, and which is great. I'm not taking anything away. I love each of those series on their own merit, but if you want to take like that classic science fiction and everything that inspired it and everything that it has inspired, the original Star Trek is absolutely textbook perfect, because other than maybe a couple of witty lines here and there, there's not a lot of interpersonal character drama. It is a Monster of the Week style show, only it is space monsters. Right, and it's a lot more action and a lot of CGI and little dialogue, actually. There just isn't a lot of talking because people would fall asleep. They want to see lasers and things blow up and ships going at light speed, all that kind of. I agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The space western style, the Star Wars style of things, right? Where nobody really cares why an alien is being repelled by the shield. All that matters is that it is, whereas Star Trek will give you the reasoning that it has something to do with the resonance frequency, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay, yeah, absolutely.
Last question, then we got to wrap it up. Is there any particular, since we've been dissecting this idea of genre, I think I'll just stick with that. Is there any genre that you do not wish to write, that you have no desire?
Hard romance. Which, I mean, there are people out there who make an incredibly good living writing romance, and they can write the same kind of story and just ever so slightly change the names. And I think that if I applied myself, I could probably put something out there that would be readily consumed. But there is no part of my heart, soul, or creativity that wants to get into that world. It is. I've realized that there are two genres, or like two worlds in writing, where it is as cutthroat as the worst boardrooms in North America, and that is romance and kids' books. And which is very strange.
It is strange. That's unfortunate.
But the worlds are just, I don't know where it comes from. They're complicated to write in order to write a properly crafted kids book or a properly crafted romance. It takes a lot of research and a lot of understanding of your readers, but I simply couldn't do it. Maybe I'm just too emotionally stunted to be able to relate to most of the romance that goes on out there. I don't know. My wife could probably answer that question better than me, but I couldn't go anywhere near it. I couldn't even dabble in it. I'm even writing the interpersonal relationships and the romances between married couples that I'm sometimes working in. Even then, I'm like, oh, God, these people just seem so stiff. There's nothing really attached to that. I think I'm probably working on one that might change my idea on that, but for the most part, I can't touch it, and I wouldn't even try. There's way more talented people than me, and they're welcome to that writing space.
Mark, we do got to wrap this up. Thanks so much for coming on. Let's see, the book you're promoting right now is which one? Between Conversations?
Between Conversations. Yes,
Okay.
Between Conversations, Tales from the World of Reunion was out on September 25th, and it is available on Amazon in ebook and paperback. And as I say, it's a 9-story collection that takes place in a very science fantasy world.
Oh, super. And do you have a website you want to give out? People come check you out?
I'd love to. People can find me at www.markwatson.ca. So that's MarcWatson. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at @WriteWatson, WRITE, or you can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/MarkWroteABook, all one word.
Mark wrote a book. I like that. All right, Mark. Thanks a lot. Thanks for coming on the show. Great conversation.
Thank you very much for having me, Douglas. I